Of this public hearing. Broadcasting is good to go. Fantastic. I declare open the second public hearing on the Joint Standing Committee on Treaties for its inquiry into the Council of European Convention on the Manipulation of Sports Competition. I begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to elders past and present. I also wish to extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples joining us today. In accordance with the Committee's resolution of 31 July 2025, this hearing will be broadcast and proof and official transcripts of the proceedings will be published and made available on the Parliament's website. A reminder to all present that as the Chair, I will ensure the proceedings are conducted in an orderly, respectful and courteous way. I remind members of the media the need for fair and accurate reporting on the proceedings of the committee. I'd now like to call our first witness for today. For the I welcome Responsible Wagering Australia to give evidence. For the Hansard record, could you please state your full name and the capacity in which you are appearing before the committee?
Certainly. Kai Cantwell, CEO of Responsible Wagering Australia.
Thank you. Although the committee does not require you to give evidence under oath, this hearing is a legal proceeding of the Parliament and therefore has the same standings as proceedings of the respective houses. The giving of false and misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. It is the responsibility of witnesses to record any questions on notice that are taken. To begin with, would you like to make an opening statement?
If I could.
Great. Proceed.
Chair, Deputy Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear today. Responsible Wagering Australia is the peak body representing the Australian licensed online wagering industry. Our members include Bet365, Betfair, CrownBet, PickleBet, PointsBet, SportsBet and Unibet. RWA works with government, regulators and sporting bodies on policy and integrity issues across the wagering sector. Individual operators manage their own compliance and reporting directly with regulators. I'm here to speak about the broader policy framework and offshore risks relevant to the Macallan Convention. I'm not in a position to comment on individual company processes or commercially sensitive arrangements, including specific product fee and integrity arrangements. RWA and our members strongly support Australia's ratification of the Macallan Convention. We support it because, at its core, this convention is about protecting the integrity of sport. With Brisbane hosting the 2032 Olympic Games and Paralympic Games, it is an important time for Australia to reaffirm its commitment to integrity in sport. Sport only works if fans believe the outcome is genuine, unpredictable and fair. The moment that confidence is undermined through match fixing, corruption or manipulated betting markets, the foundation of sport begins to erode. Australia has strong integrity systems. Sporting bodies and licensed operators monitor betting in real time to detect unusual activity. Where concerns arise, markets can be suspended and matters escalated to sporting bodies for integrity issues, to AUSTRAC for financial crime, and, where appropriate, shared across the industry to identify broader patterns. But that system only works where betting occurs inside the legal and regulated market, and increasingly it does not. In addition to evidence given by Sport Integrity Australia last week, where Mr Moeller said, "Our concern is generally that illegal betting space where we have less visibility," independent research by H2 Gambling Capital, commissioned by RWA, found that Australia's illegal offshore gambling market has more than doubled since 2019. It is now worth $3.9 billion per year and makes up 36% of total online gambling. That offshore market is predicted to reach $5 billion by 2029. It is growing at 2.5 times the rate of the onshore market. Illegal offshore operators share no betting data with sporting bodies, file no suspicious matter reporting, often operate using opaque or untraceable payment channels, are often criminal cartels operating in regulatory and tax safe havens, and offer markets on minors and low-level sports that are easy to manipulate. As betting migrates offshore, integrity oversight weakens, there is no transparency, no accountability, and no cooperation with regulators or law enforcement. This results in funding for integrity systems and oversight declining concurrently. Article 11 of the Convention encourages action against illegal sports betting, including blocking access to illegal websites, disrupting payments, restricting advertising by illegal operators, and strengthening consumer awareness. These are consistent with the recommendations set out in the H2 Offshore Gambling Report. Ratification would align Australia with international best practice, strengthen cross-border cooperation against the offshore threats, and support nationally consistent enforcement against corruption in sport. If we are serious about protecting integrity, we cannot ignore that a growing share of betting is moving beyond our regulatory reach. Thank you, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much for that, and it does kind of complement in ways the hearing that we had last week. And just to that, I've got a couple of questions before you can see. It's a lot of interest in our committee with who's present today. But just the one area I wanted to pick up, one of the things that we discussed in the first hearing with the department was that this treaty is actually already in force in other countries. Whilst we've signed it, this is the first time we've actually sought to go that next step in terms of ratification. Do you believe, like you said, that there's been a real increase in offshore gambling? Is it because of our delay, or is it just technology, the global financials changing? Like, why do you think that we've seen a real explosion in gambling offshore? That's the first part. The second part is, what would happen if we don't move quickly to ratify?
Look, in relation to the why, I think the why is a combination of factors. We are seeing greater technology. We're also seeing regulation in Australia at some of the highest levels globally. Now, we are rightly a highly regulated industry. We need to just be aware when creating new regulation that we're not putting barriers in place for Australian punters which might drive them into that illegal offshore market. We're certainly seeing the tipping point here in Australia. We've seen it overseas in other countries like Norway and Denmark and Spain as well, where their regulation has gone to a point where the illegal offshore market has blown out to 60 to 70% of their total market. We're only at 36% here. I mean, that is still 1 in every 3 bets being placed with an illegal offshore provider. And I think the risks of those illegal offshore providers are you don't just lose the important thing we're here to talk about today being the integrity. You also lose really important consumer protections. We lose Australian jobs, and we lose taxation revenue and revenue that would otherwise go to sports and racing codes. And a lot of that money then helps them manage integrity threats as well. So the why is a complex issue. It's not just over-regulation, it is technology, and it is ease of access. And so when we're talking about things that can be done to address the illegal offshore market, we're certainly looking at the powers that the ACMA have. We think they are certainly doing an admirable job. They are shutting down websites where they can. They have quite a prolonged process to go through to shut down illegal offshore sites, and by the time they shut them down, they're routinely back up and running with a slightly tweaked URL or with a VPN within the first 24 hours of being shut down. And so there is an enforcement need for greater powers for the ACMA to act swiftly and effectively to shut these sites down. The other thing that could be done is some financial work on the financial institution side to stop Australians being able to deposit money quickly and easily with illegal offshore providers. So there's definitely a piece of work that could be done by the government in cooperation or partnership with financial institutions to stop or at least slow down or put some barriers in place for Australians to deposit money with illegal offshore providers.
Are you confident that Australians know what's in illegal or legal or onshore, offshore gambling? When they're on their phone, they're sitting there, they don't necessarily have to be at the pub, which seems to be the method of choice with gambling these days is through your mobile phone device. Do you think Australians know?
Look, our research presented some eye-opening facts in this space. We know that people generally recognise some brands. but the prevalence of advertising amongst illegal offshore providers is making it really confusing for people. I think we're seeing around, I can get the specific figure, but around 45% of Australians cannot distinguish between a legal licensed provider and an illegal offshore provider when asked. That is concerning. And there certainly needs to be some work done on brand recognition amongst Australian providers, and there's some work that the industry can do along with government and regulators to make sure that we're making Australian brands or Australian licensed brands more prominent, but B, doing what we can to address the scourge of advertising of illegal offshore providers that are flooding our airwaves, but in particular social media.
And are you finding some really alarming sort of examples of predatory behaviour? Like once you sign up, if you haven't gambled for a beer, they deposit $5 in your account and say you've got this. And then if you don't respond, they go, we've upped it to 25. Like, are you seeing sort of behaviours like that?
We certainly are. And we're seeing more concerningly the sort of size and scale of the promotions that are being offered by illegal offshore providers much broader than what the legal licensed regulated providers are allowed to offer. We have very strict guidelines on promotional activity. They're offering massive incentives to sign up and deposit or redeposit with them. They're also offering revenue share arrangements for referring friends and family. So refer a friend and we'll give you 20% of their losses back to you. So that's encouraging them to A, get people to sign up, but then also B, to encourage their friends and family to continue betting. The other concerning factor on this side that the research found is that these sites are targeting people who have signed up with the self-exclusion register, which we've partnered with government on, and we're working very hard to promote. It's been quite a success, but what it has highlighted is the risk of these illegal offshore operators, because they are now advertising themselves as providers not on BetStop. So they are basically targeting vulnerable punters who have taken these steps to protect themselves, who are now being targeted by illegal offshores.
My final question before we go to the Deputy Chair, one of the questions I also asked the Department was in relation to sort of sports or regions that might be at greater risk than others. For example, is it like regional tennis matches or something like that where you wouldn't expect there to be this kind of activity? Are you seeing any of that? Is there particular sports or regions or levels of codes that we should be concerned about, or is that why they're being targeted? Because people don't suspect that tennis match in Bendigo to be something that people are wagering on. Yeah,
look, that's certainly the areas where the manipulation is most likely in lower level or under 18 type competitions. You've seen some proactive steps from the licensed industry here in Australia to move away from some of the markets that are more likely to have integrity concerns. There's also it's a careful balancing act for licensed providers. The moment we leave a vacuum, we really leave it there for the illegal offshore providers to fill. But there are certainly sporting events that we do not offer odds on. Obviously, we don't offer markets on under 18 sports, but it is still certainly an area of risk, and the lower level competitions where the sports people themselves are not being paid the kind of money that the professionals are being paid, and therefore are open to greater manipulation.
Not related to this inquiry, but just because you might know the answer. So it's not illegal in Australia to bet on an under 18 sporting event?
It is not illegal for Australians to bet, I believe, on under 18s. It is also not illegal for Australians to bet with an illegal offshore provider. It is simply illegal for them to offer the markets here in Australia. And just the other thing, while you've opened that sort of line of questioning, is the illegal offshore providers, and going back to a previous question, the illegal offshore providers often target Australians with the markets that they're currently betting on. So they'll target them with sports or racing, because they're legal in Australia. But they very quickly transition them into forms of gambling that are completely illegal online in Australia, such as casinos and pokies online, which have far greater, far quicker losses, quicker spin rates than traditional poker machines in venues, and real people spinning the roulette wheel, for example, who might talk to you and engage with you personally and try and encourage you to continue betting with them. So it's a very clear transition from the lower margin products into the high margin, high speed, high turnover products.
Deputy Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just in terms of your submission, you've said it's $3.9 billion in 2024 with a forecast growth to $5 billion by 2029 and 36% of the Australian online gambling market. Do we know roughly how many humans we're talking about that are actually involved in the online gambling market that is offshore? And then second of all, I'm just mindful we've just gone through the social media bans for under 16s, which has caused the creation of an enormous apparatus within government to try and monitor, inform, educate, etc. What kind of apparatus is required to actually ensure that people are not going to be using these offshore platforms? And do you have an example of where that's been done successfully here or elsewhere?
Look, a couple of questions there. Firstly, the number of people. We did the research on the size of the market based on dollars, and so we're talking 36% of the market. I'm not sure we've translated that into the number of people, but it is safe to say approximately, based on my latest figures in my head, we've got around 7 million Australian adults who enjoy a punt from time to time. Now, that might be a once or twice a year on the Melbourne Cup through to a regular weekly kind of punter. So if we're talking a third of those customers, that's a fairly substantial number of Australians. And when you've got the figure of around 50% of people not being able to differentiate between a legal licensed product and an illegal offshore product, we're talking some 3.5 million Australian punters who don't actually know the difference, which is quite concerning. In terms of what could be done, on top of the work that I talked about on potentially doing something with financial levers being pulled to stop payments going offshore and enforcement activity being improved for the ACMA, our research also recommended a national illegal gambling blacklisting platform, a centralised database that ultimately allows multiple actors to report into it. Maybe someone like the ACMA coordinate and spit out reports and information to the broader gambling adjacent type community, so wagering service providers, financial institutions, internet service providers and the like, to allow for quick action to block both payments and access to websites. So that's certainly a recommendation that we have put forward and will continue to put forward, and part of the reason we're very happy to be here today is to talk about these kinds of recommendations to provide practical actions that governments can take to strengthen the protections. Now, as I said, there's still work for the industry to do as well. We're not shirking our responsibility. We think there is a piece of work that we can absolutely do to raise greater awareness for Australians around what a legal licensed and regulated provider looks like and the benefits of betting with a legal licensed regulated provider as well. In terms of where the system has worked quite well in the past, and particularly with an integrity bent, I think I can give the example of the 2023-24 A-League season, where the former Macarthur FC captain pled guilty to match fixing after intentionally receiving yellow cards. So in that case, effectively wagering service providers reported the suspicious betting behaviour, because that betting happened onshore with legal licensed providers, reported that through to AUSTRAC and to the sporting codes. And the Victorian Gambling and Casino Control Commission CEO, Susie Nealon, once they had gone through the processes, shut down the markets and followed through with prosecution on the players and the actors involved. She was quoted as saying, "The guardrails worked. A wagering service provider reported suspicious betting activity to Football Australia and to the Victorian Police via AUSTRAC, who took swift action." I think that what that shows is the case worked when betting happens onshore. The minute that betting goes offshore, that suspicious betting behaviour would not have been reported and there would have been no follow-up. It may still be picked up by the sporting codes through poor behaviour of the players. They may have noticed some suspicious actions. But again, you lose the ability to deal with the betting companies because they're offshore. You lose the ability to have a clear paper trail and then prosecute bad faith actors like the players, for example.
Thank you.
Okay, member for Sturt.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, Mr. Cantwell. I had 2 questions. I just wanted to be absolutely clear that your concern from the integrity perspective is not just with match fixing through illegal online offshore betting, but with illegal offshore betting generally. And I just wanted to understand the difference between, so match fixing I can see if someone contacts me and says, missed the last goal in your Wednesday night Masters competition, which is probably going to happen anyway. I can see that that's an integrity issue. But without that sort of insider, as it were, or someone who is playing the game taking a step, what, in your view, are the integrity issues in sport with the offshore illegal betting agencies?
It is simply the growth of the illegal offshore market, and this is why it's hard to untangle the two, despite the fact they are quite different things. So the integrity concerns are amplified massively once the betting goes offshore. And so we need to deal with the growth, the very substantial, rapid growth of the illegal offshore market now, to ensure that we protect the integrity of sport going forward. And that's why I can sit here today and say we're very supportive of ratification of the Macallan Convention. And in fact, we believe that once ratified, we will already be meeting the obligations almost in full. There may be some tweaks required here and there to make sure we're fully compliant, but we believe we are already complying with the Macallan Convention because it's so important. And the other reason for importance, and I may have mentioned this already, so apologies if I'm repeating myself, but is for Australia to continue to be global leaders. We have only seen really European countries sign the treaty, with the exception of Australia and then I believe Morocco as well. We'd really like to continue to be global leaders, see more countries signing on. The more countries that sign on, the stronger the integrity framework globally. Because, as I say, the criminal cartels that are offering these illegal offshore sites are basing themselves in regulatory and tax safe havens. The more of them we remove, the stronger the system and the harder it is for them to infiltrate the Australian betting markets.
Yeah. Okay, so I think I understand that the integrity issue is the growth and proliferation of the offshore market, which then in turn creates greater platform for further match fixing, etc., and all these other issues. Okay, thank you.
Can I just ask just one clarifying question to that, though, if I may, through the chair? So your $3.9 billion that you're suggesting is through the illegal offshore. Is it illegal or is it offshore platforms? Presumably not all people betting through offshore platforms are doing it through illegal ones.
That's correct. I mean, this is illegal. The $3.9 billion is illegal offshore platforms.
And have you got a sense of the market of legitimate offshore platform betting from the Australian punters?
Legitimate offshore we consider onshore. So
okay.
We have many internationally owned wagering companies that operate here in Australia. We consider that onshore betting because they are licensed and regulated here. So really we only consider there to be an onshore licensed regulated market and an illegal offshore market. And even if some of those illegal offshore companies were set up in Australia, which there are some, let's call them grey market operators here, based here in Australia, who are offering products internationally, but do pick up Australian customers, we consider them still to be an illegal offshore provider. They are unregulated here in Australia, so there are a couple of Australian-based companies that are multi-billion dollar.
But unregulated doesn't mean illegal.
Unregulated means illegal if they're operating to Australian customers.
From out of Australia. Okay.
Yeah.
Just a second one. Thank you, Chair. So a bit of a request for a dummies guide. Apart from licence, regulation, and of course, match fixing and where the proceeds of betting go, which is obviously very different for illegal offshore companies, what are the differences from an activities perspective between illegal offshore betting agencies and licensed legal organisations here? Because apart from the
the match fixing, I can't see a huge amount of difference.
Yep. Look, probably, definitely, most importantly, they don't offer any consumer protections. We are so highly regulated, and as I said, rightly so. We offer a product that can cause harm if not used correctly.
So I definitely understand the regulation, consumer protection, licensing, all of that. I'm talking about the activities in terms of the offering. What is the difference?
So the products offered will be largely the same when it comes to wagering, so sports and race betting. They can offer inflated odds because they don't have any overheads, and this is where all these other arguments come together of safer gambling. They don't have a dedicated safer gambling team. They don't have AML and CTF teams. They're not complying with any other laws, so they are operating on a very small budget, and therefore they're able to offer inflated odds. So that's one way of attracting customers. Bigger bonuses that are outside of our regulation to encourage people to sign up. And then, as I was going to earlier, they also offer products that are entirely illegal, so casino and poker machine products, which, again, they sort of bring people in generally through the front door of wagering, which looks legitimate, feels legitimate, and then transition them over to those more dangerous, quick spin, high value products. And again, as I say, they're offering real people talking to you face to face. I've signed up with a few as a test case to test them out, and they call, email, harass me every few days to try and deposit more money, and the bonuses they offer get bigger and bigger. So they're certainly quite aggressive in their approach.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. The member for Bowman.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned, obviously, we've got European nations and Morocco that have signed up to the convention now. What's been the experience in those countries, particularly dealing with this issue of illegal gambling?
It's a different experience across the world, and it largely comes down to the enforcement approach taken by each country when it comes to illegal offshore in particular, rather than the convention, and the regulatory settings of each environment. As I mentioned before, some countries have gone quite far in terms of their regulation, and it has shown a distinct increase in illegal offshore activity. And that's why I say routinely we're not anti-regulation. We are just pro-sensible regulation in our industry, because we need to be very careful every time a new regulation is implemented that we're not driving more consumers into this illegal offshore market.
Could you give us some examples of some countries that are handling this challenge well, and others where it's out of control?
I can give you definitely some examples of where it's being handled poorly. We tend not to hear about the ones that are handling it very well, because the markets are doing what you would expect. There are certainly some that are very mature markets. Australia we would consider a really mature market. There are some that are much more or much less mature. But in terms of some examples where we're seeing a massive increase in the illegal offshore market, Norway is probably one of those that has had a substantial increase in the illegal offshore market. They introduced a state monopoly, so they drove a bunch of providers out, increased restrictions on stakes and affordability checks and advertising, and they saw their market blow out to 66% being illegal offshore. Again, this isn't an argument for no regulation. This is an argument for sensible, evidence-based regulation, and considering those factors that we've seen internationally. We saw Italy ban their advertising and their market blow out pretty quickly to 23%. And we saw Sweden increased restrictions, and this again goes to the issue of bonuses and promotions. They did away with most of their promotions, and the illegal offshore market went up to 59%. So we see the increase in regulation has a fairly consistent, fairly rapid flow-on effect into the illegal offshore market. Now again, we just need to make sure we get the regulations right and look at this evidence before implementing new regulations.
And just on the question of advertising, you mentioned the hope through Article 11 of the Convention that those sort of actions, like preventing advertising of the illegal product, could be enacted. Could you sort of explain to me what how are people finding themselves in these illegal offshore, apps or websites currently? Is it word of mouth? Are they, openly advertising on social media? What's the situation in Australia at the moment? How prevalent is advertising?
Becoming more and more prevalent every day. Social media in particular, and what you'll see is a really challenging one to address, but one that we need to turn our minds to as the industry and as government and regulators around the country, is the advertising on non-sports, non-betting pages. So your Facebook and Instagram pages that are just a funny cat video, for example, that all of a sudden now are being branded with pokies.com. Just on the top and the bottom. Now, these are pages that kids are absolutely looking at, and that any manner of people around the country are looking at. That advertising is just flowing through social media feeds all day, every day, and there's quite often affiliate links that you can then click on through those links. So there is one avenue. The other main avenue for people finding these sites is just through a Google search. Right. They are not banned from you promoting their websites on a Google search. So you might get a Sportsbet, being one of our members, a regulated betting provider, come up when you Google Australian gambling provider. You might get one or two of our members. You'll also get one or two illegal offshore providers. And when you're finding them on Google, it feels much more legitimate. You're giving the air of legitimacy through Google. Or any other search engine, to be clear. And then there's probably the third group of people that are effectively looking for what they know to be an illegal offshore site because they want to play the pokies or casino games. So they're actually looking for the content that they know they can't access here in Australia. But importantly, I think most people believe that you need a VPN to access these sites. The vast majority of them, you don't even need a VPN. You can access just through your web browser on your mobile phone. I could bring one up right now and deposit money with a credit card. It is very easy, and that's why we say there needs to be a greater enforcement approach to these sites as well.
Senator.
Thank you. Mr. Campbell, can I just unpack a little bit that link between increased regulation in the examples that you gave and increased illegal and offshore gambling to understand why that's occurring? Is that, in your view, as a result of essentially the field being vacated by the legal companies in the advertising space and the illegal companies just ignoring regulations, or is there something more at play there?
There's a little bit of that. So certainly, and this is why we do have concerns with increased restrictions on advertising for our product, because we know the illegal offshore guys will not stop advertising theirs. Again, that doesn't mean we shouldn't look at sensible regulation. The other kinds of findings in our research is around people looking for products that don't exist here or better odds. So the better odds argument is absolutely a real one. There are no overheads in an illegal offshore provider. They might be running a one or two person operation. Our regulated providers here in Australia will have teams of tens or hundreds of people doing AML, CTF, safer gambling, and all of the other controls that exist in our licensed environment, whereas these guys don't. So they can offer a much better odds offering and a much broader offering of products. So they're offering live in-play betting. They're offering markets on things that we're not offering markets on, either because we're regulated out of that environment or because we choose to vacate it because we think it's risky. And so they are offering different products, better odds, referral bonuses, the kinds of revenue share models that I was talking about earlier, I think that's probably it.
In terms of, sorry, I've got just one more follow-up. In terms of the point you made earlier about brand recognition, just so I understand that point, is it essentially that Australians recognise certain established brands like TAB or Sportsbet or 365 or whatever it is, and therefore make an assumption about reliability and will prefer those brands? Is that the brand point in the legal v illegal debate?
Look, there's no shying away from the fact that people will recognise probably 2 or 3 brands here in Australia more than others, and thankfully, at the moment, those 2 or 3 are legal licensed providers that they're recognising. People are starting to recognise a few other grey market or black market operators as Australian brands, one of which is Stake.com, which is affiliated with Kick. For those watching the Formula One, I think this weekend, you'll see Kick, if it's on, you'll see Kick and their partner brand Stake advertised. Now, we've got, thankfully, fairly good restrictions here on the fact that they may not be able to advertise on the cars their gambling brand, but they will be advertising their affiliated social media brand, where they use that avenue to promote their gambling brand fairly heavily. And as I say, this is where the grey market operators here in Australia are really getting involved in targeting Australians in covert ways, where they're sort of not seem to be deliberately doing it, but they certainly are picking up Australian customers. And so the other side of that is the smaller or the other illegal offshore operators do quite often tie their brands quite closely to Australian brands. So they'll have similar colouring and letter fonts and sizing to appear to be one of the legitimate Australian licensed providers. And we've seen site mirroring in the last few months too, where basically they'll pick up a legal licensed brand, slightly tweak the URL, match everything about that site so it looks exactly the same, and then once you're in, registered, signed up, all of a sudden it's a casino. And so we're certainly seeing that, the prevalence of that increasing as well.
Okay, final questions go to the member for Lone.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. I've got 3 questions. Firstly, I'm surprised there's so few countries that have signed this convention. Is it because of the nature of the organisations that are dealing in illegal wagering that it's a challenge for other countries to try and deal with them? I mean, what sort of organisations are we talking about that are running these illegal wagering operations?
Look, it certainly could be a factor. I couldn't go on record and say it definitely is, but we are certainly talking about illegal organised crime rings that are offering these products. We've seen some of them tied to Russian mafia, and they're operating in jurisdictions that would see a lot of criminal organisations operating from. As I say, so Russia and Curacao, for example, are 2 of the areas where we're certainly seeing a lot of the providers coming out of. Broadly, why else haven't we seen people signing up to the convention? I think, again, that comes back a little bit to Australia being an early adopter, and I know it's been in train for some time. These things are never quick. I think Australia is doing a good job and leading the way, and I think, again, us signing up will hopefully bring others into the conversation, but there's certainly, again, a role for Australia in promoting that to the rest of the world and encouraging others to sign up.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned earlier the role of the financial sector in addressing illegal wagering. From your experience, what more do you think the banks can do to address the problem?
Well, I think it's an important one in addressing Article 11 of the Convention. It talks about blocking of financial flows between illegal sports betting operators and consumers. We've got a recommendation in our research as well that talks about banks and major payment service providers being required to block transactions linked to the illegal offshore operators and merchants. So we're in lockstep with the Convention on that one. What could the banks be doing? Look, we know financial institutions are already blocking transactions linked to fraud, breaches, money laundering, child exploitation material. We know the technology and the capability and capacity exists. It's probably a decision more for banks and financial institutions about whether this, where it rates on their priority listing, and the sort of time and effort they're willing to put into this. But we certainly see it as a logical next step that potentially government could involve themselves in terms of encouraging financial institutions to take that next step and look at payment blocking for illegal offshore providers, which I understand is done in other countries, such as the US.
Okay, and final question. We're seeing a plethora of VPN providers, so Surfshark, NordVPN and others that seemingly are enabling. I mean, you did mention, though, that some of the illegal wagering doesn't need a VPN access, but obviously some would.
Yep.
I guess, are there any countries around the world that are actively engaging, have you seen with those VPN providers, to try and regulate the provision of their service so to, you know, they're being more responsible about not facilitating people to access essentially illegal products in the country that the person is actually sitting in?
I certainly don't have any evidence of that being done globally. Our first priority at the moment is focusing on those that are just broadly accessible. But I think if we address that issue, we're going to move very quickly to the issue of people accessing those sites with a VPN or a geo-block to get around. And so I think we need to probably do a bit more work in that space and unpacking how these sites could be addressed when used via a VPN. But as I say, I don't think we've even got the regulation to the point where we can stop people accessing these sites just on the internet as usual at this stage. So we're certainly focused there first.
Sure. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your attendance today. You will be sent a copy of the transcript of your evidence and will have an opportunity to request corrections to any transcript errors. If you've been asked to provide any additional information, could you please forward to the Secretariat by close of business Monday 9th. 2026. I just note that not everyone got a chance to ask questions today. So if we do have questions that people would like to ask, there might be some follow-up questions that we send through. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Great. We now have our final witness for this inquiry coming forward, so we'll just pause for a moment while we give our final witness the opportunity to come and join us. Welcome Jack Kerr to give evidence today. For the Hansard record, would you please state your full name and the capacity in which you are appearing before the committee?
My name is Jack Kerr. I am an investigative journalist. I've previously worked with the ABC. I've done investigations for The Age on this topic, the New York Times, and more recently with a Norwegian outlet, which is the world's only outlet dedicated to corruption in sport and specifically football, and the overlap with the offshore gambling industry, which is a very niche topic but has kept us very busy.
Although the committee does not require you to give evidence under oath, this hearing is a legal proceeding of the Parliament and therefore has the same standings as proceedings of the respective houses. The giving of false and misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. It is the responsibility of witnesses to record any questions on notice that are taken. Would you like to make an opening statement?
Yes. Well, last year we did some research into Russian bookmakers and we did an audit of them, and we looked at, in particular, the games of football that they were offering, and there was lots of games. There's a handful of games from the Ukraine. There was lots of games from other Ukraine-aligned countries. In fact, we worked out that more than half of the offerings on these Russian websites were coming from countries that were either part of NATO or were supporting Ukraine. But the country that was number one on the list of offerings, as we've found time and time again in the audits we've done of the offshore industry, was Australia. And one example in particular stood out, which is a team from Western Australia, from Perth, called Inglewood United. Now, that was started by Ukrainian migrants to Perth in the post-World War II era as a social hub for Ukrainian migrants. And now it's become it's changed its name and become the Inglewood United after being called Kiev Football Club. And those games were being offered by Russian bookmakers, including one, I'm not sure if I should name names, but in any case, it was an example we found fairly egregious of, Australia spending a lot of money to kind of combat what's going on in Ukraine and to support Ukraine. And here we were seeing people's, in many cases, amateur performances, people paying to play, and that was being data digitised and sent off as data and then monetised by offshore figures running gambling sites, often unregulated, often unlicensed, or if they are licensed, they're licensed in countries like Curaçao, which is basically, it's a veneer. It's not much more than that. I don't think there's any regulation really going on there. I don't know what anti-money laundering practices they have in place. I don't know what they have to look at match fixing or suspicious bets and that kind of thing. And yeah, this is a topic I've been looking into for almost a decade now, and just seems to be I don't know if it's getting worse, but it remains an issue, and I think it's an issue that is quite serious and is something that the Parliament should be looking to address. And there's a lot of you have to balance up a lot of different things in bringing forth legislation, but this would be something that would be an easy win and would get the community on side and would kind of at least be one tick against the gambling industry, its worst excesses.
So in what you've seen and through the investigative work that you've done, and can I also acknowledge and thank you for putting in a submission, because it was an area where we really did go quite broad to say, hey, give us your thoughts on this, and we weren't overwhelmed with submissions, it's fair to say. So it's good to be able to have evidence from outside the department and outside the industries that are most impacted. So thank you for putting in a submission. But in the research that you've done and what your understanding of the convention is and how it's worked in Europe, how do you think it would help Australia? Like, why is it in our nation's interest, particularly for community sport? Soccer is growing. It's one of the fastest growing community sport activities we have. How will this help?
Well, I think the gambling industry can be prone to attracting a lot of shady characters, shall we say. Like, gambling itself is perhaps a fun pastime, but it's an industry that attracts pretty shady characters. Even in the regulated market here in Australia, there's always headlines about money laundering issues or, various, people committing suicide or people scamming their clients and spending all that money. Now take that offshore into an unregulated environment. Anything that can be done, and I think this treaty takes some good steps to doing that, to tackle these issues, to put some limits on the access to data from matches. I think particularly community matches, that should be completely off the table. Even the professional leagues like the A-League or the AFL, I think some questions have to be asked about who gets access to that data and why offshore, unlicensed or under-regulated bookmakers are able to access this data so easily.
And when in the past you've made complaints, because we did hear from in the hearing that we had with the department that, yes, this treaty, if ratified, there will be some laws that need to be changed at the state and federal level. Where did you find there are gaps? So you've done this work. Is it the next step being the law enforcement, that we just didn't have the laws in place to pursue this further?
I mean, we don't really even need the laws in place because, like, often these games are happening at council-run venues. They're leased by clubs. Clubs can ask people to leave their venues. You go to these matches. Like, imagine that when I turned up, I was wearing a hood and I was just sitting there on my phone all day like that. That's what is at these matches. There's these data scouts that turn up and they're just like punching data into these websites that are then going to the other side of the world. I've sat there next to one and said, can you put in a fake result? And he'll put it in, and then within 8 seconds it turns up on this like website from, I don't know, Kazakhstan or somewhere like that. And it's clearly come from this guy because it's something that hasn't happened in the match. So, I mean, like, internet technology is so quick these days. But I think that, this issue has a very tight choke point, which is if you're not at the ground or don't have access to the video stream, then you don't know the live data. You might see the end result, but what the offshore market wants is the live data. That's where they make all their money. And so if you can cut off that stream of data coming out of these venues by either training people to kick out these data scouts or telling the sports that they shouldn't be there, because a lot of them at soccer matches are actually walking around with accreditation lanyards. So it's being permitted by the sports, and I have to single out football/soccer for this. And I think it must be happening with a degree of permissiveness that we don't see anywhere else in the world, because that's the only thing that I can see that it would explain why Australia consistently is above everyone else in the world. Like most other countries, you wouldn't get more than 100 games on offer in a weekend. We can get close to 300. And we're talking about like the Sunday League in Perth, which I don't know what that is, or there's a league on the Gold Coast, and I rang them up and asked them what was going on, and they said, oh yeah, that competition has players that are over 60, and it has players that are over 60 because you have unlimited subs. Now normally in football it's, it's a big moment in the game when they bring on the subs. Here it's just like what I would play with my friends. Everyone can just come on and off. But they had a company that was paying them, I think it was 20 grand to have the rights to go and collect the data. And then there was another company that would just send the guy in the hood and sit at the other side of the park and punch in the data.
So do you think in that particular situation, because that was going to be my next question, is why is Australia targeted? Do you think that sporting league or code had any idea that they were sort of being brought into this international kind of betting kind of arena? Like I just think about my own local leagues and who runs them, and out of good faith they're just trying to get dollars from wherever they can to run their competitions. Do you think that there's a high level of awareness or understanding?
No, I don't. And I'm constantly surprised if I go to a match and I talk to someone, they're like, oh, I didn't know our matches were being offered on, like some people do know, some people don't know. Maybe there's a bit of willful ignorance, but I'm not sure that they know exactly how far it spreads and where it ends up and the kinds of people who it's fueling.
Do you think that that's also an area where we need to up the responsibility?
As a government?
Yeah, or state government or local government. Like if you've got a venue that is being misused in this way, like does that help bring about better compliance?
I know that gambling has usually been a state issue, but like the Interactive Gambling Act is probably a good example of how the Commonwealth can step in. And if there was I think it would be a pretty easy amendment to that to say that live data on community matches, on perhaps matches where there's less than 1,000 people in attendance, cannot be sold, cannot be collected, cannot be sold, and perhaps I think that there needs to be greater transparency in the industry. Like a lot of these companies will take the data, they won't tell you who they sell it to, they won't tell you the number of games that they're collecting on, who has access to that data. And often, they often put out integrity reports, and you see like half the games are below the second level, half the suspicious matches, but they often are not even doing integrity checks on those lower level games. So they'll go and they'll take the data, but there's no formal process of alerting the league if they're seeing a whole bunch of suspicious bets coming in. And if those suspicious bets are happening on these lower matches, I'm not sure how authorities in Australia are going to do anything about it, because, if you look at, say, the Southern Stars case, that was a pretty major operation with players flowing in from around the world. It went on all season. The fixers had basically taken over the club. It was a pretty major operation. But and the police were putting microphones on the goalposts and stuff like that to capture what was going on. If a game was fixed last week and we're pretty certain it was fixed, you'd have no way of checking the suspicious bets, because mostly the market for these lower level games is the offshore market. The local providers, that's actually one thing that they don't offer a lot of, with some exceptions, but generally they're not that interested in these lower level games. So these lower level games are going off to markets where they're only being bet on by people who have no idea who these games are. You can't get information about these games. You have no way of making an informed bet on these games. So there is absolutely no reason for those games to be being offered. It's quite different to, say, like there's lots of race courses around the country. Not everything's the Melbourne Cup, right? But that's quite different because that's an industry that's set up around gambling. This is an industry that's set up around people wanting to have fun, stay fit.
Yeah.
Maybe they dream of being Ronaldo, but most of the time they're quite happy to play in the Perth Sunday League, and they're often paying to play, or they have a day job. So that just shouldn't be monetised for crooks overseas.
Questions over here?
I've got a couple.
Great. Member for Bowman.
You mentioned community football. What other sports in Australia have you seen this?
It's much worse in football. I think because of the global nature of football, people understand it. I think people don't have any idea what AFL is, for example. The way this research started in 2017 was by looking at basketball. So there was a little bit of an issue with basketball. So I did a report for background briefing on the ABC where we sent someone down to a venue in Hobart with about 12 spectators with like wives or partners and children or whatever. And there was a shadowy man punching the data into his phone, or in those days they had a headpiece. So I think football, soccer is the main one, basketball to a lesser degree. But like I've even noticed, and this is not something I've reported on before, but there's an ice hockey rink in the suburb across from me in Reservoir in Melbourne, and there's a website it was founded in Russia, but they were kicked out of there, and they're called 1xBet, and they offer a whole world of these they're made-up games. So they have all these sweatshops essentially in Eastern Europe where people are just playing 20-minute games 24 hours a day, literally. Like I've gone back to these sites all day, and it's literally the same venue. There was a competition that was going on in Reservoir that data, I'm not sure if it was known or unknown, but that data and the live stream of that game was being used by this Russian website or Russia-founded website. So there is the potential for any sport to do it. We could probably make up a table tennis competition and get it taken by the betting market.
Indeed. What sort of markets are they actually offering? Are people betting on the result, or is there capacity to bet on, what I'm trying to get at is the risk of spot fixing rather than match fixing. Like, are they betting on who's scoring the first goal or who's getting the first yellow card?
Yes, I'm pretty certain that would be the case. The data that gets sent in is often it's quite basic, but it's goals, it's attacks, it's yellow cards.
Right.
It's red cards. It's not the kind of, some of the people I've spoken to are like, oh yeah, the data gets collected so we can do some good analysis of the games. But the data is not that complex, but it's complex enough that you could say who's betting, who's going to score the next goal, or over-unders is very popular, will more than 5 goals be scored, yellow cards, red cards.
And typically, if it was an Australian company offering a market on a lesser league, it'd be relatively capped in terms of what you could bet. Is that what I'm just trying to get a sense of the risk here. If are you going to get the same? Are you able to get the same return on these websites that you would on betting on a Premier League game?
Oh, definitely not the Premier League or the World Cup. No one knows how much money is going through these smaller games. Some have said it's fodder. Maybe it's just like the bots are just betting on these, but no one knows. But I think with the incentive, say for match fixers, yes, if you can get the big game, absolutely you'd want to get that because basically you can make unlimited returns on it. But that's not realistic most of the time because most of the time the players can probably make more money through branding and whatever than you can give them. So they are kind of there's more of a targeting of the lower levels is my understanding. Mm-hmm. They don't get the bigger returns, but they probably aim for more consistent returns.
Okay. And have you seen any evidence through your investigations of corrupt conduct in terms of people?
All looks above board when I go, but I've asked people to have a look at videos of goalkeepers fluffing the ball, and that's fine. But I know that a game in my neighbourhood got investigated by Victoria Police, but I mean, I'm not sure why. Maybe it wasn't fixed, but if it was fixed, I don't think they could have done a proper investigation, because no one on the onshore market was offering that game. So how are they going to get any information about suspicious bets?
Yes, good point.
Yes, so we'll go to Member for Maribyrnong and then to Member for Lyne for our last questions.
Thank you. I'm intrigued by the point that you made around how Australian, and in particular soccer, is quite prevalent in the space. Can you, in your investigations, where else in the world have you seen where they have made changes that has addressed this particular issue? Is there anything that you've seen?
Yep. So I gave a lot of assistance to a German television current affairs program who did a very similar kind of investigation to the ones I've been doing. They did that in Germany. They sent out camera crews and they found these data scouts at venues. It's my understanding that subsequent to that, I don't know whether it's the states in Germany or the leagues, but they really cracked down on it. Mm-hmm. And I think it must have been all but one state did that, because now that market, when I've looked, has been completely obliterated, except for this one state in Germany, which I think says that it's quite easy to stop this happening. Yeah. And I think that there'll be some in the industry will say, but if we don't do it, the bad guys will do it, the drug dealer defence. But I think that it's because there is this choke point of, if you're not at the venue, you can't get the data, or if you're not watching the video stream, you can't get the data, and therefore, if there's no data, there's no live betting on it. Yeah. And if there's no live betting on it, there's not much interest in the game at all. So, you'll never be able to stop people betting on the end result of a game, but I don't think that's really the issue. I think there's a high priority paid to having a person at the venue, because it is basically in real time that the betting or that the odds can be updated. Whereas if you do it from video, there can be a bit of a delay. I think that sports should also be a bit careful about, there's a lot of live streaming that goes on. I've seen one match in New South Wales was appearing on a Russian website before it was appearing on YouTube. So I don't know how they were even getting it before then. But there should be a delay. It should be at least a couple of minutes, and that will lessen that danger as well.
Yeah. And can you sort of connecting it back to this convention, the ratification of this, for Australia to ratify this, how this can help us sort of tackle some of the issues that you've investigated?
How the treaty can?
Yeah.
The treaty talks about restricting the flow of data on sports that are inadequate. I think it calls them or inadequate something. I think most of the sports in Australia, once you get past the professional level, would qualify as that. And I think if we've signed this treaty, and very exciting to see that it's finally reaching the stage where it could come into force, I think that should be one of the things that is seriously looked at, as well as issues around advertising. There's a lot of advertising, they were talking about the social media advertising. Sure. I've done a lot of research into virtual advertising and to the offshore brands that are advertising in major sporting competitions in Europe, the English Premier League, or La Liga in Spain, where Real Madrid or Barcelona can play, and there's they have actually a gambling advertising ban there. Yeah. But you watch the match and for 30 seconds there's one XBet everywhere. You can't take your eyes off it. Right. And I've written complaints to ACMA, and they say, well, that's considered incidental advertising, which I don't think anyone who watched it would be able to take their eyes off it. Yeah. But I think it's kind of become this embedded belief that advertising that is at a venue is something that we can't do anything about, but it's clearly not the case.
Sure. Appreciate that.
Member for Lyne.
For appearing today. I just want to clarify in my own head. just because there is illegal wagering on a game does not mean that that game has match fixing. Is that correct? So what, in your view, is the extent of match fixing and illegal wagering that's going on here in Australia? Do you have a...
I have no idea, but I was pretty shocked to see that in recent years there have been so many of these yellow card scandals that are happening in the A-League. But I don't think anyone would really know, because we have no way of knowing, because we have no oversight of where these bets go. And so unless maybe we're getting a tip-off or there's some interception of Telegram chats or something about, let's make this a 3-1, I'm not sure how we're going to ever know. So I think the whole point of cutting off the data is, firstly, it's pretty gross that these offshore bookies are making all this money from our semi-professional and amateur sports people, but also just remove that risk.
So how are they recruiting these data scouts? Have you
They run ads in Seek and they just...
Right.
They're pretty open about it, yeah.
Right, it's pretty blatant. We need people to take... Okay.
Absolutely.
Right, okay.
They do it all around the world. Solomon Islands, anywhere in the world, they're looking for data scouts, but for some reason Melbourne and Australia just seems to be the peak of it.
Right, okay, right.
I just had one follow-up. Just if Australia was to go down this path, because we've also heard evidence that other countries haven't, we'll be one of the first outside of Europe to do this. Do you think that would send a very strong signal to countries in our region? Would that start to encourage there to be more of a proactive look at this outside of Australia?
Absolutely. I think that the Macklin Convention is a great treaty, and it's a shame that it's limited to Europe. And I hope that Australia does set the example of showing that we're a country that's committed to taking on this issue. Like we've seen that in many other areas, that Australia likes to think of itself as a leader in the sports integrity field. And I think it's a good signal to the rest of the world that they should also get on board.
Great, thank you. Thank you for your evidence today. You'll be sent a copy of the transcript of your evidence, and we'll have the opportunity to request corrections to transcript errors. If you've been asked to provide any additional information, please forward to the Secretariat by close of business next Monday the 9th of March 2026. And with I declare this hearing and this meeting closed. So I thought there was some other...